Welcome to the debate. When we engage with Norse mythology, we are immediately struck by a pantheon that is just so far removed from the polished heroes we find in other traditions. The gods of Asgard, as they're illuminated through the Eddas, are characterized by this volatility. They're chaotic, competitive, petty, and deeply flawed.
Absolutely. And that's what makes them so compelling, right? These are not symbols of perfection. They are figures whose highly flawed, passionate personalities really provide the essential dramatic engine for the entire cosmic narrative.
And no figure embodies this messy, unpredictable reality more fully or is more intensely debated than Loki. He is the shapeshifter, the trickster, the father of monsters, a character who represents pure, powerful, and often inconvenient chaos. So the central question we have to wrestle with is, well, it's fundamental. Was Loki's chaos a necessary and even strategic force for the gods? Was it driving essential narrative progression? Or was he primarily just a source of inherent untrustworthiness and menace, just as the myths so often imply?
I believe the latter is the defining truth of his character. I really do.
And I'm going to argue that Loki's role as creative chaos is not merely accidental, but is in fact essential and fundamentally misunderstood. It serves a necessary catalytic function in the cosmic order.
And I will argue that Loki is exactly as untrustworthy as the myths suggest. He is fundamentally defined by the danger and menace he creates, regardless of any, temporary or accidental benefits that might spring from his disruption.
So for me, Loki has to be viewed not simply as some rogue agent, but as a figure of unique genius. He is indispensable for Norse storytelling precisely because he embodies pure creative chaos. His function is to inject the radical unpredictability that compels action. And his history follows this really specific cyclical pattern that I call the Loki cycle. He endangers the gods, only to then be credited with subsequently saving them, often by creating the very tools they need to survive, like Mjolnir or Skidbladnir.
That cyclical pattern, though, is deeply inefficient. It involves so much unnecessary risk.
Well, not if you view it through a strategic lens. His genius lies in his ability to force change. Look at when he risks Idun in the Apples of Youth. He places the Aesir on the brink of aging and death. It's only then that he retrieves her, having forced this necessary, painful realization about their own vulnerabilities. His claim that the endangerment was, quote, part of the plan, while, it's delivered by a trickster, it still suggests a highly strategic, long-term, if wildly unpredictable mind. And this trait, I might add, is mirrored across the pantheon. Odin is both a relentless strategist and a chaotic figure himself. Loki just distills that element down into an active force.
I see why you want to elevate Loki to the status of a chaotic mastermind. I really do. But I come at it from a different way. While Loki occasionally benefits the gods, and we can't deny the gifts he acquires, his fundamental actions define him as inherently untrustworthy. Scholars define him as proof that even the gods had troublemakers. And that classification is earned. It's earned not through his benefits, but through his repeated betrayals.
But his role is complex, and those benefits are often monumental.
Okay, but while he is responsible for the creation of Mjolnir, he is equally, and I would argue more tragically, defined by the calculated, cruel killing of Balder. That's an act of pure malice and cosmic destabilization. His identity as a shapeshifter, as a trickster, intrinsically suggests deception and an inability to be relied upon. The concept you cited, that he represents inconvenient chaos, well, that confirms my position. His actions fundamentally destabilize the cosmos. Any benefit he offers is typically a cleanup operation, often motivated by the fact that the damage he caused would put him in mortal danger if he didn't fix it.
All right. Let's deepen the discussion on the nature of that chaos then. You frame it as purely inconvenient, but without that disruptive element, the foundational narratives, they just stall. Where's the conflict? Where's the innovation?
See, I have to challenge this idea that it's creative chaos in a beneficial sense. If Loki represents chaos, it is fundamentally inconvenient because it repeatedly places the gods in existential jeopardy. His untrustworthiness is a permanent defining feature of his personality. It's not a temporary plot device. He doesn't create solutions, he creates crises, which, yes, sometimes force him to act heroically, but often just to save his own skin or avoid the wrath of Thor.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. The myths required this specific, radical element of unpredictability to drive their most profound moments. And we have to look at Loki's function relative to others who also employ manipulation. Consider Freya. She's a cunning negotiator and strategist, and she practices Sidra magic.
Right. And Scyther is a disruptive form of magic. Absolutely.
Exactly. Scyther is a type of sorcery often associated with prophecy, manipulating fate. It blurs cosmological lines. Even Odin fears its full power. Yet, we accept Freya's strategic maneuvering and her mastery of Scyther as profound, necessary skill, even though it's achieved through unorthodox means. So why must Loki's disruption, which often achieves equally complex ends, like acquiring the god's greatest treasures, be seen only as menace? His actions, like Freya's use of Scyther, are boundary crossing, but I'd say they're essential.
I think the difference lies fundamentally in the motive and the consequence. Freya knew her worth, and she used her mastery to negotiate status, to win battles, or protect her domain. Loki uses his skills, which are rooted in deceit, to dismantle established order. He is the trickster by definition. His goal is disruption for disruption's sake, and the costs are just so much higher. You can't equate strategic, managed manipulation with existential, malicious disruption.
But this brings us back to the sequence of his accomplishments. Saving the gods, endangering the gods, saving the gods again. This pattern doesn't suggest a random agent. It suggests a necessary, cyclical function where his interventions, even the damaging ones, move the overall narratives forward in a way no other god could. Okay, let's look specifically at the saga of the Master Builder.
Ah, a perfect example of his untrustworthiness.
Yes, but also essential strategy. The Aesir had rashly agreed to this contract with a Jotun architect, promising Freya, the sun, and the moon if the wall of Asgard was completed too quickly. The gods realized their folly and were trapped. Loki was the one who devised the trick by shape-shifting into a mare to distract the giant stallion, which allowed them to win the contract and secure the wall without paying that terrible price.
But in doing so, he placed the entire future of Asgard in jeopardy for his own self-preservation. He was forced into that trick because the gods had threatened him with torture for enabling the giant's progress in the first place. Loki had created the crisis by encouraging the rash deal to begin with.
But that is exactly the point. He created a crisis they couldn't solve on their own, forcing an impossible intervention. When he subsequently saves them, we have to take that action as solidifying the idea that he operates as a chaotic yet essential mastermind who's capable of these non-linear solutions. The story only progresses and the Aesir only get their ultimate protection because of his radical disruption.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the outcome retroactively justifies the chaos. Let me tell you why. Loki's claim that it was part of the plan, you can't take that seriously. That claim just reinforces his identity as a liar, a trickster trying to excuse the instability he caused. It proves fundamental unreliability, not genius. We should be constantly challenging the word of the ultimate deceiver.
And yet his disruptive function is mirrored by other gods, though they're celebrated for it. Consider Thor. He's revered as the protector, but he is fundamentally disruptive. He's the ancient world's primary example of a deity who creates problems by solving problems too hard. I mean, Thor's brute force often turns a misunderstanding into a battle in record time. He operates on a high-octane form of physical chaos.
But that comparison falters on motive and cosmic role. Thor is the unwavering protector of Midgard and Asgard. When he uses Mjolnir, it is a symbol of protection, even if he, abuses it to smash things. His chaos is contained by his purpose. Loki's motive is pure, self-serving chaos, or even malice, which is evidenced by his ultimate alignment with the forces of destruction at Ragnarok.
So you're arguing that because the gods are inherently flawed, Loki just embodies the most destructive aspect of those flaws, the pure menace.
Exactly. His role is conceptually different from figures like Odin, who sacrificed an eye and hung himself on Yggdrasil for the revered pursuit of knowledge. Odin's chaos is strategic and aimed at securing esoteric wisdom to protect his people. He even stirs up conflicts among mortals to gather the best warriors for Valhalla, which is a chaotic means toward a calculated end. Loki's disruptions are rarely calculated toward a collective good. They just threaten stability.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because the source material indicates the gods' personalities mattered precisely because they were complex and deeply human in their decisions. Loki's chaos makes those stories feel immediate and real. If Odin is the relentless strategist who, refuses to read instructions and insists on achieving enlightenment the hard way, a kind of brilliant, stubborn, self-destructive genius, then Loki is a trickster who similarly achieves results through non-traditional, chaotic means.
But there's a crucial difference in the outcome of their flaws. Odin's self-destructive actions ultimately enhance his power to guide the cosmos, even if he is a terrible father figure. Loki's self-serving actions lead directly to the unraveling of the cosmic order. His disruptive tendency leads directly to the death of Baldur, which sets the inexorable course toward Ragnarok. That is the definition of inherent menace.
I just struggle with how to categorize Loki's motivations in those early myths if we only define him by his eventual fall. If his initial chaos was truly meaningless, the myths would have disposed of him long before Baldur. Instead, he drives monumental changes. He ensures the gods have the tools they need to even exist in the world. He's the necessary foil to the predictable power structures of Asgard, the genius who solves the problems the muscle, Thor, and the wisdom Odin just can't touch.
That's a compelling argument about narrative necessity. But have you considered that the fact he remains the most debated figure means the underlying question of his loyalty and trustworthiness is exactly what the myths intend for us to question? That fundamental ambiguity is the proof of his inherent unreliability. He is the walking embodiment of the untrustworthy agent, and maybe that's his central genius. The listener can't rely on him, and neither could the seer.
I would still maintain that Loki's role as creative chaos is essential to the entire Norse mythological framework. His necessity as the great, unpredictable genius who injects this element of disruptive strategy, it ultimately outweighs the perception of untrustworthiness. That makes him a profoundly misunderstood strategic force, rather than simply a menace.
And I maintain that Loki's inherent untrustworthiness, demonstrated by his identity as a shape-shifting trickster and the consistent tragic trajectory of his actions, that is what truly defines him. He is exactly the troublemaker the myths suggest, and while his chaos occasionally provided a beneficial byproduct, often accidentally, it was always at the expense of cosmic stability, and that ultimate lack of reliability is his defining feature.
Well, I think what we can definitively agree on is that the distinct personalities of the Norse gods, whether it's Thor's overreaction, Odin's stubborn wisdom, Freya's strategic mastery, or Loki's complex, unpredictable chaos, that's what gave this mythology its lasting heartbeat.
Indeed, they created a universe full of figures who are often wise, sometimes foolish, occasionally hilariously ill-suited for their responsibilities, but always driven by powerful, recognizable passions. The enduring value of these stories is found in navigating those complex characters and their messy, unforgettable decisions.